Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
And welcome to Book Trek, brought to you by Tales from the Fandom, where you can get your fandom anytime, day or night. We're open 24/7. Just click on the podcast links and subscribe. And here we are for Book Trek on the journey into the Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearne. We are on Book 2, Hexed. So if this is the first time you guys are joining us, you might want to go back and start with the first book, Hounded. And once again, I'm joined by my partner in crime for Book Trek, Jachelle Overstreet. How you doing?
I'm tired. It's late.
It is. We're doing a late night recording, just because it's just how it has to happen this time.
Yes, but I am still super excited to be here. So I'm gonna push through the sleepiness, and this is gonna be an amazing podcast.
Yes, indeed. And again, like I said, if this is your first time listening to the Book Trek series and you haven't read Hounded or this book Hexed, you might want to take a break, pause this, listen to one of the other previous episodes, and then catch back up with us, because there are spoilers, just so that way everybody knows. So we are, once again, this is for Hexed of the Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearne. Jachelle, we're going to do this differently than the first one, and for everyone listening, we're not going to really do like a play-by-play of the entire book, because hopefully you've read it. So we're going to do a shorter-ish kind of overview of what happens in this book. And I just have to say, obviously with the Hexed, I mean, it is obvious to me, totally all about magic this time.
What? That's totally not predictable.
Not at all.
Yes. Yeah, we get to talk a lot about witches this time, and I'm really excited because I love the witches.
Especially since they showed up in the first book, which is a nice, I think one of my favorite things about the Iron Druid Chronicles, especially from book 1 to book 2, is they remember what happened. Like, Kevin Hearne is writing it, and he's rolling with things that happened from the first book into the second book. And I like that there's a lot of carryover. There's not even a lot of time gap. I think it's only a couple months from the events from the first book into this book.
Not even months. I think it's closer to like weeks.
Maybe so.
But yeah, it's amazing how Kevin Hearne manages to weave these stories together. Does make things a little difficult for us because we forget which parts are in which books.
Yes, as evidenced by I think the first episode of with Hounded, and there was something that you had brought up that actually happens in this book.
This book, I felt so bad.
Now. We got to meet a lot of the primary characters in Hounded, and we're not going to really go back to discuss the events in Hounded. If that's something you guys want to take a listen to or read, definitely do so. But my favorite part was the opening of this book, because it starts out with Leaf, Atticus's lawyer, vampire lawyer, from, he's a Viking. And he wants Atticus to kill Thor because, hey, Atticus killed two members of the Irish pantheon last book, so he's in high demand.
He did. I think it's important to mention, too, before Leaf shows up with his request of Atticus is sort of narrating things that's going on, and he's talking about how since he killed Bress and Angus Oak, he's had just an onslaught of people turning up on his door saying, hey, you should kill this person and you should leave me alone. Like, he talks about the Greeks and the Romans, the Easter Island heads. There's a whole group of people who know who he is now, and I think that's really important because prior to this, Atticus has been in hiding for years, centuries. He'd, been on the run from Angus Oak, and not a lot of people knew who he was or that he was even still around. And that's all gone now.
Yeah, that was a big thing, is that he took his chance last book and decided to fight and not run away, basically. Right. And he has opened himself up to the entire world of all these pantheons. And I guess, he's the last druid, and he's about to start teaching Granuel down that path, as we continue into this book. But it's just amazing. Like, I can't imagine. I tried to put put myself in that headspace of, like, I'm the last druid of, like, this culture. I'm trying to keep everything alive, and now it's not only that I'm involved with the Irish, but all these other pantheons, which he's been involved with multiple times over his lifetime, with dealing with them. But it's just so, like, I'd love to know, or even have a glimpse into, like, what registered in their thoughts of, oh, he's still around.
This dude is still kicking.
Which is crazy. I mean, but that's a good thing. Except it's not a good thing for Atticus, because now he's on everybody's radar.
Yep, he's on a major watch list at this point. And killing Thor is going to do nothing to help that. It's going to bring more unwanted attention and trouble. And Atticus isn't having it. So he shuts Leaf down pretty quickly.
He does, and then we roll into another carryover from the other from Hounded. Is that there are still demons and hellspawn on the loose. He has to survive an attack right in his front lawn, and thankfully Leaf is actually there to, or no, Leaf is not there.
Leaf is not there.
But he gets help from his house protection, so to speak, and all his wards, and they take care of some business. And I think this is the first time where Gaia comes into play, because he calls through an elemental to get Gaia involved, because these things are not of Earth at all, and he needs Gaia's intervention to really help out at this point.
And also, before the demon attack, actually, Atticus survives a magical attack when Leaf is still with him.
Yes, that is correct. I totally forgot. And that's how it kicks off this book.
Yes. So that's going to be a major plot point of this book, because not only are Melina and the remaining sisters of the Three Auroras still kicking around, the ones who did not go up into the Superstition Mountains and try to kill Atticus along with Angus Oak, but now there's some German witches in town. They sensed a power vacuum in the area, and they're coming in to try to take over.
Indeed, and that's the start of the plot of this series, is that there's the magical attack on Atticus, and he follows up with the Aurora Coven, because he's like, oh no, I got to get to the bottom of this. And you find out that one of theirs was also killed, and he and they, whoever, the Coven, they were making a non-aggression pact, and they actually go through with it. And again, this is something where Atticus is going out of his really comfort zone to be involved with something other. Like, I think he's cool with werewolves and, with Leaf as a vampire, because it's just a trade-off, but witches were never a thing for Atticus. There's too many. He hates
witches. He stated multiple times in this series he hates witches. And yeah, now here he is having to sign non-aggression treaties with them. He's having to work alongside them. And yeah, it's definitely kicked him out of his comfort zone.
And he has to do this and work with them because, as you said, there's this group of German witches that are in town wanting to take over. And there are Bacchants from Vegas coming in to do their Bacchanalia type of stuff, which is not a good thing.
No.
And I don't know. Did you ever read True Blood or the whatever the books are called, the Southern Vampire?
The Southern Vampire Mysteries. I made it through about 4 of them before they got weird, and I was like, no.
Well, I know that in that series there was one season or one book that focused on Bacchants or the what happens, and and as I was reading this, it took me back to that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can see the problems, and I saw what happened in the TV show with True Blood, and I'm totally understanding why that they are a problem.
Yeah, they are a big problem. They come in and just start with a little nightclub, and it spirals pretty quickly out of control. Atticus has to make a deal with the witches that he is going to get rid of these Buckins because they currently cannot leave their house, because if they leave, then they're going to be attacked by the German witches, and then Atticus is really going to be in trouble.
Yes, and he can't get help from the werewolf pack because of the events from Hounded, where several of them died and got injured, so they're not too happy with him either.
Yep, so he can't get any help there, so he turns to what he feels like is really his only option. A returning character from book 1, the Indian witch Laksha, who used to share Granuel's head.
Yes, and there's a deal made for her to come from North Carolina back to Arizona, and that is that unlike Atticus, who gets to brew his own tea to keep himself immortal, and unlike other powerful magic ways to keep yourself life extended, you have to rely on somebody else. She asks Atticus to go take a golden apple from one of the gods in Asgard's garden, which will hopefully maybe allow her to grow a tree to keep her alive. Basically, she just wants to live forever too.
Yeah, so we're seeing these deals are starting to like pile up on top of each other, and Atticus doesn't like any of them, but he feels committed to staying because he has to stay in Arizona right now because he feels responsible for the destroyed land around Tony Cabin that Angus Og left. So he has to make all these deals so that he can stay in town and things can stay safe so that he can heal this land. So he and Laksha head out. They go to kill some Bakans. And of course the police get involved.
As they usually do.
They do.
And it doesn't turn out well. And they're once again looking for somebody missing an ear, which, again, book 1, he lost an ear by having it gnawed off by one of the demons, and that gets resolved. But we'll get there in a second, because I think we skipped over a new character that was added in, which is Coyote. Well, and again, we talked about this in the first book review. There's a lot of stuff happening. It's in the books, it's made super easy for us balancing where things are. It's a bit crazy, but we have Coyote show up and say, guess what? You're responsible for dealing with this demon. And it actually turns out to be not a demon, but a fallen angel that has also escaped from hell, thanks to book 1. And you have to go kill it because it's your responsibility.
Yes, and he tricks Atticus. He says that because Coyote is a Native American god, he says this, I wouldn't care if this thing were eating white people, but it's eating my people, so you need to come deal with this.
And eventually it would have gotten around to Atticus anyway, because of how Angus had triggered the conjuring circle of anything that is still out there is predetermined to go after Atticus at some point to finish off Angus's bargain with them to come up and destroy him. So yeah, we have that, and we've got we've got a lot of stuff, and I don't want to have to gloss over it, but there's just so much stuff going on. Atticus has to talk to the widow McDonough and pray for Mary to show up. So that way they can get some holy blessings to go and actually kill this fallen angel, because they're a bit tougher than demons.
Yes, just to clarify, he gets the widow McDonough, who is a devout Catholic, to pray to Mary to come down, because obviously his prayers wouldn't mean as much, being that he is not part of that religion. So he gets the widow to pray. Mary comes down. He meets up with her. She blesses their arrows. He and Coyote go off, almost get their asses kicked by this fallen angel, but they end up winning in the end. And that is that.
and chalk another big win up for Atticus on, two Irish gods now and a fallen angel is pretty impressive in a short amount of time. But yes, getting back, he has to deal with the Bacchants. He and Laksha had agreed to 12 Bacchants, and that is a big sticking point, and there turned out to be 15.
Yes.
So Laksha left, and she's like, yeah, I'm done. I killed the 12.
You can take care of these other ones.
And you can take care of these other ones. And he's like, what do you mean? And we had a deal, and yeah, the deal's for 12. Go get me my apple now, as long as you survive. And he barely made it out alive.
But yeah, it is of note that 2 police officers saw him outside the club and were planning to blame this massacre on him. They both ended up dying, and Atticus was able to escape, but a lot of people saw him on the scene with his missing ear. So the news is circulating this story that, hey, this guy who matches Atticus's description, missing an ear, was involved in this huge massacre where a bunch of people died.
And then we get the wonderful re-involvement of our Irish pantheon of politics and fun times. Because who should show up but the Morgan? Because, she's there for reasons. Last book, she wanted to find out the secrets to his cold iron talisman or necklace, the thing that protects him. And she's back. But this time they get it on, and they have some sex magic to heal his ear. And it's not a pleasant fun times for Atticus.
No, it's quite painful for him. But in the end, he is pretty grateful that she went out of her way to do that for him. And then is quickly angered by her when he realizes she was also setting him up to be found by Briette, who shows up almost immediately afterwards.
Right, like she lingers. She's like, "Oh, can you make me an omelet? Let's just talk at the things that honestly, if you've read the first book and you're reading this book, you don't see the Morgan actually doing, and it's like, he's just right in there, and for all the paranoia that he has, like. And it does come about, like, he's like, oh, now I understand, like, the game she was playing about eating an omelet and, like, lingering about.
Yeah, he's definitely starting to become wiser to the games that Briette and Morgan are playing with each other and how he consistently seems to be caught in the middle of them. So Briette shows up. Her plan was to ask Atticus to be her new consort in Tir na Nog so that she could secretly study his amulet, because she wants to figure it out before the Morgan, because she feels like if the Morgan gets it before she does, then the Morgan's going to take over Tir na Nog as first among the Fae, and she doesn't want that. So she tries to manipulate Atticus into being her consort. He says no. She nearly burns down his kitchen.
He has to pull a sword on her.
He has to pull a sword on her and get her oath that she won't murder him, which she eventually does, and then she takes off in a huff.
On top of this, we still have continued investigation from the police due to the scene of what's going on, and they come almost immediately after Brigitte leaves because one of the werewolf lawyers shows up.
Yes, Hal shows up, and he and Atticus have enough time to hide Atticus's swords, and then the police show up. Atticus puts on a little bit of a show, pretending to be a stupid college kid. But the major thing is that they are looking for a person without an ear, and Atticus now has his ear back thanks to the Morgan. Mm-hmm. So they've given the cops doubt that he's who they're really looking for. But the main detective, Kyle Geffert, is still, he knows something's up.
But in the meantime, Atticus has new investigators on the scene besides the police. Because the one of the oldest jokes in the world actually happens to Atticus when a priest and a rabbi walk into a
pagan bookstore.
A pagan bookstore, yes. And there is something hinky with them going on. and they they play it off initially, like, oh, we're just looking at these old books and whatever, but it comes out that they know who he is and what he has done at the club with the Bacchants, and that he was involved in several other meetings or involvements with werewolves and vampires and whatnot. And it turns out that they want to work with Atticus, but they also they have their own agenda going on as well.
They hunt what they see to be evil magical creatures, which is werewolves, vampires, demons. That's their thing. But the big difference is they don't see shades of gray. They don't see that there are good witches and bad witches. They just see there are witches. They can sort with demons. We've got to kill them all.
Absolutely. And werewolves too.
And werewolves too, yes. So they're pretty pissed at Atticus, actually, because they think he's been consorting with demons. And he takes offense to that. There's some nasty words traded back and forth. But the big conflict with them doesn't come in till towards the end of the book.
Right. And then we find out who these German witches are. And they are called, and we're not going to butcher the German name, but they call themselves the Hexen, essentially, or Atticus calls them the Hexen. And it's these German witches that were around during the World Wars and had involved themselves with Atticus as he tried to get families out of harm's way during that time. And they actually killed a particular family, and were trying to go after him as well at that point. And he wants revenge on them for what they did.
Yes, and that works out well because obviously the Sisters of the Three Auroras want revenge for the Hexen killing one of their coven members. So again, we have Atticus making another deal that he wouldn't normally have agreed to, but he needs to stay in town, so he needs to help fight these German witches. But he can't do it by himself. So he calls up Leaf, who has been pretty much ignoring him through most of the book, because Atticus won't agree to help him kill Thor. So Atticus says, you know what? Fine, I will help you kill Thor if you help me kill these witches. There's 20 of them. They have demons. They have demon babies. It's going to be a mess. And Leaf was like, I'm there, So Leaf and Atticus and the Sisters of the Three Auroras, they saddle up with a variety of weapons that Atticus stole from his next door neighbor.
Yes.
Mr. Submergian, who has a checkered past with Atticus. He really hates him. But he has a lot of RPGs in his garage.
And for those that are listening, rocket-propelled grenades.
Yes. Yeah, he's got a lot of scary weapons. So Leaf charms him, Atticus takes the weapons, and they are off to fight the witches.
And it's a pretty long fight. That sequence of events is carried over, and it's a long piece of the book.
It is, and a lot goes on. Eventually they do triumph, but another one of the Sisters of the Three Auroras is killed. The rabbi from earlier is the one who showed up and strangled her to death with his beard, which we won't even get into right now. Leaf almost dies. Leaf is set on fire and has to jump out a window. And yeah, it's they pretty much level the building they were fighting in. So it was a big fight. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of demons and witches to kill, but eventually they are successful. And now Atticus is left having to go to Asgard twice. Once for Laksha to get her golden apples, and another to accompany Leaf to kill Thor.
Yes, and I believe one of the things that Atticus had said to Leaf was, you need to go assemble your team of whoever wants to go kill Thor. And then I think he said, we'll do it by the end of some date. I think is like a December, New Year's. And just as a quick side note, going back to the Bacchants, because they are tied to a god of let's see here, what, Roman Bacchus?
Yeah, Bacchus. He's the Roman god of wine.
And I'm pretty sure one of those Bacchants got away and was like, I'm going to tell Bacchus on you, and
Yes, one Bacchant did escape. And that will come back into play in the next book.
So yet again, Atticus is making enemies and friends all over the place. More enemies than friends.
Yeah, he's in a whole lot of trouble, basically.
Yes, and so now we kind of wrapped up that book. Book 3 is what we'll talk about at near the end of this episode, but we're going to move into a discussion time. And Jachelle, you had a wonderful question or discussion topic. If you want to read it, that's cool. If not, I can read it. Whatever.
I mean, you look at this series as a whole, and it's kind of just a series of events. But if you really narrow it down, the whole series can be boiled down to one decision that's made by Briette. So we know that Atticus has hidden and run from Angus Og for centuries.
Yes.
The only reason he didn't run in book 1, the only reason he stayed and decided to fight and take a stand is because Oberon had been kidnapped. And it's revealed that the reason Oberon is kidnapped is because Briette told Flittish to make sure that happened. So in one move, Briette made sure Atticus stayed to fight Angus Og, and everything that's happened in the series since then is a result of that one decision, which I think is really interesting.
It is. It's shocking to some extent, because I think Briette did it, and Briette hadn't really been involved with Atticus at all up until the point where she actually needed him to do something.
Yeah, it was purely selfish reasons. Briette wanted Angus Og, it's Briette's brother. Briette wanted him out of the way because he was, muscling for power in Tir na Nog, and she didn't want to give up her position of power. So she's like, I'm going to make sure that this druid stays and fights him and kills him.
And, and as we get further into the book series, there is talk of like the pantheons getting involved with each other a little bit, and it's hard to imagine. I mean, I obviously not a god here, but I can see where you're focused so much on defending what you have and keeping Angus off like the throne, and he's got he's consorting with demons and everything. But at the same time, it's like, here's this guy who like worships you and pays respects to you for over like 2,000 years, and you're just throwing him into a situation that's going to cause so much so many problems down the road. So it's just so much. I don't know. Like it's crazy. Like just to think that just that little thing has set off all these events in that book or in the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes to show that, the smallest decisions can have huge impacts on our lives.
And I think you had written down, he agrees to fight the Bacchants and witches because now he's obligated to stay to heal the land around Tony Cabin. He has to go to Asgard now and help kill Thor because he needed more help that he couldn't really get from anyone else. Yep. And it's setting up to be.
It just continues on from there. It's a series of events through this whole book, or this whole series, I should say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and with I'm sure Atticus on the one hand was like, I'm thrilled to be done with Angus Og, but now it's like, yeah, I'm sure he wakes up and was like, oh crap, like just waking up and like, not only like are all these other gods being involved, but now I've got like power struggles that I have to deal with for my own, pantheon, and like one of the things when Brigitte was talking about having him as a consort was she's like, oh, Oberon can come, maybe, but Granuel, no, you got to cut her loose. Like,
Yeah, she's got to stay here.
and again, it's hard as like a reader, like you see these people trying to make like Atticus is trying to start a new grove and have Granuel be taught to be a druid, and maybe she won't worship the Irish gods. Maybe she will. Who knows? I honestly, on my side, I would doubt that she would. But it's like this druidic culture is steeped in that pantheon. You wouldn't want more of them to do the things that you need to do. Like, just she's just so short sighted sometimes.
She is, absolutely. And I think that's a big reason why she and the Morgan butt heads as often as they do, because the Morgan, being able to see the future as she does, is able to see the big picture of things. And she's very good at moving different pieces into place to be where they need to be. And obviously, Brigitte is very threatened by that, and they're constantly coming to blows with each other.
I just had a quick stupid thought. I was like, I wonder if Brigitte talked to Zeus, and Zeus always has problems with Hades because like he's the underworld guy and he deals with the dead, and he puts it in her head like, oh, the Morgan's coming for your job, just like Hades keeps trying to come for mine.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows? Because that's not in any of the books. That's my weird thought right there.
That's just David amusing himself.
Yes, as I tend to do a lot. Yeah. So this one thing, this one little, well, not little because it deals with Oberon, and therefore you're dealing with one of the main characters of this entire series, and it's one of those things where I saw a trailer recently or a book review or something, and they made mention of, just FYI, the dog does not die in the movie, just so that way people could go into the movie. I guess is a movie that they could go into the movie knowing that the dog doesn't die. And I
have to say I appreciate that, because I get more upset in movies when animals die than when people die.
Right.
I remember watching Alien for the first time, and I was texting a friend of mine at the time, and I was like, if this cat dies, I am going to be so mad. Sorry, that was completely off topic. But yeah, I get very upset when animals die.
Well, we won't talk about my Turner and Hooch when I was a kid.
No.
But yeah, like I was thinking to myself, yeah, I wonder if Kevin Hearne is like, yeah, maybe I need to just make sure that everyone knows that Oberon's okay. But dang, like you go after the druid's dog, like the dog that's lived so much longer than he should have lived already. So that's that. So everything has turned from, okay, Angus is dead, to, oh crap, Angus is dead, and now I'm on everybody's radar, and it's all Brigitte's fault, and yeah, now I'm screwed.
Yeah, which sort of leads us into our next topic, which is politics amongst the supernatural.
Yes, because this is, and I'll start off with Atticus and the witches making a non-aggression pact. Atticus signing that pact in blood, which he would never do ever, because he's so meticulous on cleaning his blood up and doing everything like that. It just goes to show, like these are strange times ahead for Atticus, because he's got to work with these witches who he would never work with before. I mean, they had relationship, like, I'll do this for you, you do this for me, but he'd never like really gotten himself more involved in that sense than what he has now, to the point of going over to their apartment complex and like hanging out with them and talking to them, and it's just mind-boggling. Like, and it's only because now that the coven is so weakened that other, like the Hexen or the Bacchants, feel like they can breach the city or breach the area, so to speak.
Yes, yeah, we didn't talk about it very much, but this area that Atticus is living in is like prime supernatural real estate. And so the witches, when they were at full strength, were sort of protecting the area, and encouraging economic growth and things like that. But now that they're weakened, these other witches are saying, they're sensing that, and they're like, we can go in and we can take over. It'll be the same thing later on in the series with the vampires. The one thing it probably wouldn't matter quite so much with is the werewolves, who seem a lot more chill than the rest of the supernatural community.
Mm-hmm. But even then, they have their own thing, especially with Atticus. Like, Atticus was like this friend of the pack, and after Hounded, like, he's really shut off from them. I mean, he does get them to do a few things for him. Like, they take the Widow McDonough out of the city because he's worried that the Hexen would go after her. He has to get the extra iron, cold iron that he had given the Morgan, and use it for Oberon and for Granuel to protect them from the Hexen. But I mean, he has to like, his relationship with the werewolves are very strained at this point. Like, he gets nasty looks from what's her name? Greta. He gets nasty looks from Greta. He gets shut out from.
To be fair, Greta almost died in the Superstition Mountains. I'd give Atticus dirty looks too if he almost got me killed.
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy.
But yeah, he's pretty cut off from the pack at this point. He still seems to maintain a pretty strong bond of just friendship with Hal, his lawyer. Mm-hmm. But that can only go so far, because Hal still has to listen to the alpha of his pack. And when his alpha says, no, don't do this, he has to listen regardless of if he wants to help Atticus or not.
That is correct. And yeah, it just like, this book, you feel for Atticus at one point, because the people he's relied on so much, like, they basically cut him off, and with everything that's gone on, we said it before, he's kind of forced into working with people and making these deals.
Yeah.
And and again, it goes back to Angus, especially with like his stuff that he had to do with Coyote, with taking down a fallen angel. I mean, it goes back to, again, what you said with Briet setting everything in motion, and now here he is, like, putting his life on the line to take down that fallen angel, and just getting involved with more pantheons than he maybe feels comfortable with.
Yeah, when at any other point in his life, Atticus would have taken off and just run and said, screw it, I will go disappear. I will wait, a few hundred years until they've forgotten about me, and then, I'll pop up again. But he can't do that. He doesn't feel right doing that, because he's got to stick around and fix that dead land.
Because it's his responsibility, and he's the only druid left, by Gonnet. So, and we'd already talked about Briet and Morgan and their animosity towards each other. Although, to be fair, like, whenever I think of the Morgan, I don't ever see her wanting, like, that kind of position among the Fae. But I guess I could see where paranoia would drive you to be like, oh, look, she's after me.
So here's the thing. I think Morgan just likes fucking with Briet, if you'll pardon my language. The Morgan's been alive a long time. She doesn't really have any friends. Her job is to collect the souls of dead people.
And eat them.
She doesn't have a ton going on in her life. I think making Briet paranoid is like a hobby for her. And so she leans into it, and she does these things to, like, screw with Briet's head and make Briet think that she's trying to take over. I agree that I don't think Morgan actually wants to be first among the Fae. I don't think that's her intent at all. I think, honestly, she just likes fucking with Briet. And Briet falls for it.
Yes. and she falls hard, and it's not a good thing. It's not like you need to be tight, like, the Morgan and Atticus, like, you don't want to screw with them, and now you have screwed with them,
Yeah.
and it's just not good.
No.
Okay, so yeah, Morgan's just messing around, like, and there are people that do that, and I think I know people that just mess with people just
I
because.
absolutely know people that do that.
But there were besides, like, the quote, air quote, that I'm doing here, bad guy deaths, and a few of the witches from the coven, the Aurora Coven. There was a fairly big, I don't know if I'd call it a big death, but there was a death that was tied to Atticus, and that is his employee Perry, who's been working with or for him for a while. And for me, and I wrote this down in my notes, I was like, Perry's death, I didn't feel like it affected them or anyone really. I mean, because he had just hired Rebecca to run the shop, and Granuel had only been working with Perry for a couple of weeks because she was employed at the shop too. So the only one that's really tied to was Atticus. And I know that, like, there was times where Atticus was thinking about Perry's death, but it wasn't like I don't know if, for me, I didn't know if Atticus was just, he's lived so long, he's seen people come and go, is just like another death. But I know this one was tied closer to him, and it's kind of like, is his again, it's his fault kind of that Perry's dead, but
Yeah, so, David sent this to me in his notes, and I was like, I disagree.
and I like that people disagree with me. Thank you.
Happy to do it anytime. So Perry's death, I feel like, actually has a really big catalyst for the plot of this book, because if you will recall, the police came by Atticus's house, Detective Geffert in general, and Atticus had put on this big show pretending to be stoner, idiot, didn't know what was going on in his own life. Mm-hmm. And then Atticus almost immediately afterwards, has to go down to his shop, and he finds out that these German witches have killed Perry. And he's so caught off guard, and he's so distraught over seeing Perry's body laying right there, that he forgets this act that he'd been putting on, and he lets it drop, and he's quoting Shakespeare, and he's being himself. He's mourning this friend of his. And that's when Detective Geffert really zeroes in on him, and he was like, you were fucking lying to me earlier. Like, you were putting on a show, you're hiding something. And that's when Detective Geffert really starts going after Atticus, is after Atticus drops that charade because he's so affected by Perry's death. Geffert sees that, and then he goes after him. So I think Perry's death actually had a really big impact on the plot of this book, because we didn't discuss it too much in our summary, but everything that was going on with Detective Geffert and the police coming after Atticus again was actually a pretty major point in the book.
Yes, and it was, and is, again, we're woven through the entire, like, book of things going on, and him popping up, and Atticus having to, there's one point where Atticus had to change into an owl and fly somewhere, and then fly back and come through his secret door, and all sorts of stuff to avoid the police and avoid just what was going on. And yeah.
And also, strictly from a writer's standpoint, I kind of feel like Perry had to die, because there's so much going on here with the Buckents and the witches. Somebody had to die. I think it was unrealistic that Atticus could protect everybody around him that well. Somebody had to die to make it real, especially for Atticus. I feel like Perry's death kind of, while obviously he was upset about it, he's going to move on pretty quickly, because Atticus has seen a lot of death in all the time he's been alive. But that's still, I feel like it grounded him a little bit, and it made him take the threat a little bit more seriously. Like, these guys are out for blood. They're going to kill everybody that I care about if I don't do something.
Right. And there's really only two choices. If there was going to be a death that was tied to Atticus, that was not Oberon or Granuel, and it was either
Right.
Perry or the Widow McDonough, which obviously she was also a target.
She
And
was.
she and we didn't even mention this. Like they got into her house, and he barely got them out. There's a big fight in her house to take care
He
of.
didn't get them out. They only took off because Hal showed up.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's
If
right.
Hal hadn't showed up, I'm almost positive they would have killed the widow. But yeah, I think Perry was the logical choice because obviously we're going to avoid spoilers for future books, but the Widow McDonough still has a part to play, as does Oberon, as does Granuel, as does even, Rebecca Dane. Hal does, Leaf does, like all these characters have things that they need to do in the future books. So again, from a writer's standpoint, I feel like it had to be Perry that died because somebody had to die, and his has the least effect on the story as a whole. But I feel like it had very much had a purpose for this book.
Absolutely. And I want to briefly just shout out like the Widow McDonough. Like if I ever get, I don't know if I'm ever going to have that kind of relationship with somebody, like a friend down the street. But if I do, like, I want them to be like her because she's amazing. Like, she rolled with the whole, okay, there's werewolves. Okay, you're like a bajillion years old. Oh, like, and she just takes it all in because I don't know. She just doesn't give a fuck at this point. Like, she's just like, whatever.
Yeah, she takes everything in stride. The supernatural, finding out that the gods are real, that her prayers can summon Mary, offering to let Atticus bury a body in her backyard. Yeah, even when the witches attack her house, she stays pretty chill about the whole thing. She listens to everything Atticus says, and she takes what precautions she can, but she's still cracking jokes the whole time.
And she does get to see Atticus naked.
Yeah, Atticus is naked through the fight with the witches in the Widow McDonough's house, and she's, making comments about his ass.
Yep.
Which is great. Like, I think she's an amazing character, and I love having her around and included in things. And she's definitely the type of friend that I would love to have in my life.
I think one of the things that I like is that with Iron Druid Chronicles, as we progress further into the story, I really like that there's these characters that show up and really lend flavor and lend like a little like they're great in small doses. Like I don't know if I could have a whole book about the Widow McDonough, but having her show up for like 1-2 chapters in the book, I'm totally down with.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will most likely be a discussion topic for one of the later books because I have many strong feelings about a side character who becomes a main character.
No, you don't. Not at all.
I have never ranted about that in my life.
Now, what's interesting about the first 3 books, because we've done Hounded, and this is Hexed, and then the next one is Hammered. But what's interesting, just as a book note rather than like plots, is that all 3 of these books came out almost simultaneously 1 month after the other in 2011. Like Hounded was May, Hexed was June, and Hammered was July. Like they all rolled out at almost like it's just shocking. Just like bam, 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 3 books in a row.
I honestly did not know that. That is really interesting.
Boom. Yeah, I think that was how it was planned, at least at the first time, just to get them rolling and out there. But yeah, that was a cool thing that I saw just in the timeline of stuff, is that those first 3 books were done, ready, and published all within a month of each other.
Oh, well done, Kevin Hearne.
That's right. And then the next one after that, it takes the year-ish, give or take. But let's see here. So after Hexed, we now have Atticus. Just to recap, he's now agreed to A, go get a golden apple for Laksha, B, to go kill Thor with Leaf and his gang of Thor haters, and he's still got to hold down Arizona, kind of like to be involved in that defense. He
still needs to try to finish healing the land around Tony Cabin. He's got an apprentice to train. He's got these Hammers of God. He's on their radar now, and he's got a lot on his plate right now.
This is not setting up to be anything, again, downhill. It's all downhill from here.
There's some good on the way, but it's mostly downhill from here for Atticus.
Definitely. And the next book is Hammered. So if you could only guess, Hammer, Thor. I'm sure he shows up in the next book. Yeah. So any final thoughts on this book, Hexed? Anything that we maybe left out or want to talk about? We'll stay away from the creepy rabbi beard because I'm sure that might come up again at some point.
Yeah, that will come up later. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, I really love the witches that he's created in this world. And that they're shades of gray. There are like the German hexen who work with demons and kill a lot of people and are just like straight up bad. And then, you have like Radamiwa too, who seemed to be okay, but then she kind of went off the deep end and got sucked into politics and power and made some bad choices and ended up dead. And then you get witches like Laksha, who was super scary and terrifying, but has since realized the kind of karmic debt she's been accruing by being this terrible person, and so she's trying to atone for that and do good things and make the world a little bit of a better place. And then the Sisters of the Three Auroras, who I love this coven so much. Like, of the side characters, excluding Hal, who is like my absolute favorite, I would have to say the Sisters of the Three Auroras are my favorite. I love the variety of women that encompass that group. I love the way they interact with each other. I love the way they interact with Atticus and later on with Granuel. And they make me smile whenever they pop up. They're good, but they still have a little bit of gray to them too. And I just find that really fascinating. And I love that he's created so... He didn't just create one type of witch and stick with that. Like, there's this huge range, and I really love that.
Right. As you were talking, I was thinking about the witches, not the Hexen witches, but the Aurora witches. And I do like that there's such a diversity to them as far as how they react to things and how they're popping champagne bottles or wine and, celebrating this non-aggression treaty. And I like that they're just not the standard stereotypical witch. I like that they all aren't the same. I like that they all have their own viewpoints or opinions, and
yeah, they all have distinct personalities. My personal favorite is Berta. For the sole moment that Atticus and Hal are at Melina's apartment, and Atticus is about to tell this really tragic war story about this family that died while in his care, and Berta's just like, wait, this sounds good. Let me go make popcorn. And she runs off to the kitchen to go make popcorn for everybody. And when all the other witches protest, she's like, she's a druid. He's gonna love playing the bard for a little while, guys. Just trust me on this. Like, I love Berta so much.
And I liked in that follow up to that where Hal was like actually eating the popcorn as
Hal gets all drawn into the story, and he's like, oh shit, and he starts grabbing popcorn too. Like, those are the scenes that like really stick with me. They're small scenes, but there's so much character and life in them that they really stand out to me, and they're some of my favorite scenes.
Absolutely. And even with some of the other characters in there, like, it's those small moments that really just breathe life into it. And that's why I enjoy that. Yes, this is Atticus's story alongside a few other like primary characters, but there's so many like secondary and tertiary characters that you get to know them, that you get to learn more about them. And I think that's one of the great things that not only did Kevin Hearne write like the main series, but he's done so many of the different novellas and short stories that as we progress through the main novel series, we'll be hitting on a few more of them. as we did with like Grimoire of the Lamb. But it just adds those extra little bits, and if you really get into it, you'll just find this world that's just so developed.
Yeah, I agree. And I would compare it to the world that J.K. Rowling created with the Harry Potter series. Because, I mean, you listen to her talk, and she knows so much about, like, the tiniest side characters. She's created this whole world in her head, and she's really good about sharing it with fans and releasing new information and new stories. And I think Kevin Hearne is the same in a lot of ways. Obviously, their writing styles are pretty drastically different, but he knows this world. He knows these characters, and he's just sharing as much as possible with all of us, and I love it.
Absolutely. And as we record this, the announcement was made a few days ago, I think, on Kevin Hearne's Twitter or Facebook, that he is now in the editing stages of finishing the last book.
Yes, he's on his final draft of the final book, and I am sad and so excited all at the same time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because on top of like the Iron Druid series, Kevin has written a book in Star Wars canon of the new canon. He's got a book coming out this month called A Plague of Giants, which is going to be, I think, a trilogy called the Seven Kennings trilogy. Which the Plague of Giants is actually one of like the first things he was working on and submitted before the Iron Druid Chronicles, and now he's gotten around to cleaning up and revising and adding to it. And I know he's working on a book with Delilah Dawson, who just wrote that Star Wars Phasma book that's all about Captain Phasma. So I don't know, like, I know I've seen some tweets from him like that he's finishing up this thing. The way that I read it was that he's actually going to be done, but I hope that maybe in a couple of years he would release like some more stuff, or maybe keep writing like the Oberon books that are out. Like
Yes.
Squirrel on a Train comes out this year.
It does, and I believe we're getting at least one more of those. I think I remember seeing somewhere that that's supposed to be a trilogy. The Oberon's Meaty Mysteries.
Yes.
So I'm almost... I could be talking out of my ass right now, but I'm almost positive that there's going to be at least one more of those. And yeah, I would love if in the future, if he could do another book like Besieged, where it's a compilation of all these really great short stories. But, you know, we'll see. Sometimes, as much as we love something, it does get to a certain point where it's like, no, okay, this is a good ending spot. Let's not drag it on too long.
Yeah, there have been things where it's been like, okay, guys, we need to wrap this up. It's just too much. But
I would rather end still wanting more than have it keep going until I'm sick of it.
Yes,
Put it that way.
And I'm glad that, you know, we're ending on what Kevin had actually wanted, like the 9 books, and getting to finish it out. So that's exciting. So yeah, stick with us as we work our way through that. The 9th book comes out next year, so depending on timing, we might actually line up to doing the review right around it when it comes out.
That'd be exciting.
That would be. But let's see here. So this episode that you're listening to will be you'll be hearing it on October 15th or anytime after that, based on your downloading of this episode. And then we'll have Hammered, which is the 3rd book, with them obviously traveling to Asgard at least once to do some business. Atticus has some business to do there, and that will be on November 15th. So you've got a month to go ahead and find Hammered at Amazon or your local bookstore, whichever that you prefer, because it's out there.
Or
and
library.
Easy to...
I read the first couple books from my library.
There you go. Or Audible, because you listen to them on the audiobook.
I do. I have procured those books in like every form possible. I have the paperbacks, I have the hardbacks, I have the audiobooks. I checked them out from the library. I'm just all over the place with those books. I really love them.
Yes, and I once again could not find my book, so therefore I bought another version on Kindle and read it. So there you go. And so anything else, or you want me to just wrap it up?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, for Jachelle and myself, thank you for joining us on Tales from the Fandom as we book trek through the Iron Druid Chronicles. Thank you again to Kevin Hearne for being a part of this. We had actually sent him a few different questions, and he said he couldn't answer them because they're actually going to show up in the last book. So he did actually participate and send us a little tag, so you'll hear his voice at the end, and then you'll hear the traditional ending. But stay tuned, Hammered, for November 15th. So get to reading, everybody, and thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Kevin Hearne, author of the Iron Druid Chronicles. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Fandom, and may harmony find you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.